Did I really feed my family a full barbecue feast for $7.79? I sure did. Stick around and find out exactly how I did it. I'm talking fall off the bone tender ribs. I made some baked beans, some deviled eggs, some green beans, some corn on the cob, a sweet potato pie, and a homemade apple pie, all for $7.79. Now, this is what I call soul food on a tight budget. And it all started with the Kroger coupon. Now, Kroger sent me these personal coupons. I had one that was $1.50 off a slab of baby back ribs. And because it is the 4th of July holiday, the ribs are on sale at Kroger. I did not know how on sale they were until I got to that cash register. But before I headed to the store, I checked my pantry, my refrigerator, and my freezer to see what all ingredients I already had on hand, because I'm not fixing to go out and buy duplicate ingredients. So I made my entire meal plan based around these ribs that are on sale. So when I looked in the pantry, I have a ton of green beans. I have about 6 cans of Bush's baked beans. I have more than enough eggs to make deviled eggs, and I had all of the ingredients I needed to make a homemade apple pie. And for the sweet potato pie, I had 3 sweet potatoes sitting in the back of my pantry getting ready to start sprouting, and we don't want that to happen. We want to go ahead and use those sweet potatoes up before they get to that point. So that's how we ended up with sweet potato pie. And since corn on the cob is a favorite in my house, Albertsons had their corn on sale 8 for $1, and I grabbed 8. So this entire meal that I'm making today cost me $8.79 out of pocket to make, because like I said, I had all of the other ingredients already in my pantry, refrigerator, and freezer. Even the ham shank. Now I have ham shank in my freezer. I usually get that from Joe V's, and it doesn't cost any more than like $5 or $6, but I had bought this ham shank like months ago. I don't know if I did a grocery haul on it or not, but I bought this ham shank months ago, and it's been sitting in the freezer. I have not used it, so I decided to make some green beans using that ham shank. Now let me show you how I turned all of those ingredients into a soul food meal. We're gonna start with the ribs. Let's take a look at all of the ingredients. All right, let's talk about this dry rub. These are the seasonings that I'm using. It's pretty much the same blend I use for barbecue chicken. I've got 1.5 teaspoons of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, a half teaspoon of white pepper, 2.5 teaspoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and a half teaspoon of ground cumin. And since I'm working with 2 slabs of ribs, I went ahead and doubled everything. Once you've measured it all out into a bowl, go ahead and give it a good mix. That brown sugar might be a little lumpy, but you can press it down with a whisk or spoon to smooth it out. Me personally, I like to use a whisk because it blends the spices better, but listen, use whatever you've got. A fork, spoon, spatula, it all does the same job. Here's what your dry rub should look like. Once it's all mixed together, it should be full of color and flavor. Now let's move on to the ribs. I've already washed and dried them, and now I'm just cleaning them up, trimming off that extra fat just to make them look nice. Now here's a step that you don't want to skip: removing that membrane on the back of the ribs. That thin layer might not look like much, but if you leave it on, it can make your ribs tough and chewy, and we don't want that. Now this is a little trick that I picked up from my dad. He'd always use a fork to poke holes all over the ribs before seasoning it. At first I didn't get it, but now I know it actually helps tenderize the meat by breaking down some of those muscle fibers. And the small holes also gives the seasoning a way to really get down in there, so every bite is flavorful all the way through. It's one of those simple things that makes a big difference, especially with tougher cuts of meat like ribs. Now here's where I left out one key ingredient, y'all. Liquid smoke. I don't know how I forgot it, but I did. That's one ingredient that would have taken these oven baked ribs to the next level and had them tasting like they came straight out of a smoker. Once I get these ribs perfectly seasoned, I'm going to let them rest for about 15 to 20 minutes. And the reason why is because it helps the flavors soak through so that you're not just tasting the seasoning on the surface, you're getting that flavor in every bite. All right, here's what the ribs are looking like after sitting for about 15 minutes. I'm going to give them just a few more, maybe 5 minutes, because I can still see some of the dry rub sitting on the surface. Now, we want that rub to look nice and wet. That means it's starting to soak into the meat. And once that happens, I'll go ahead and get them into the oven. Now, these will bake low and slow at 275 degrees for 2 hours. And one thing I forgot to mention is that I do have a wire rack inside the pan, so the ribs aren't sitting directly on the bottom. And the reason why is because that keeps the heat circulating evenly around the meat, and that is what helps with the texture. Now, after 2 hours, this is what we are working with. Now comes the fun part, wrapping these up in flavor-packed foil packets. The first thing you want to do is sprinkle brown sugar right onto the foil. No need to measure, just sprinkle. Then grab a stick of butter, slice it up, and lay it right on top of the brown sugar. Now here is the secret weapon, root beer. You can also use Coke, Dr. Pepper, or even apple juice if that's what you have on hand. You won't even taste it when the ribs are done, but the soda helps break down the meat, and that's what keeps it nice, juicy, and tender while it steams in the foil. Once they're all in there, fold the foil up and create a sealed packet. That way none of that steam escapes while it's cooking. You're probably going to need 2 pieces of foil per slab depending on the size of the foil that you use. One just would not cut it, so I had to use 2. This is what they look like. Tender, juicy, and packed with flavor. All right, now let's move on to the corn. Like I mentioned earlier, I did pick this up at Albertsons on sale for $8 for $1. You really cannot beat that price, y'all. I actually have some corn growing out in my garden, but it's not fully pollinated just yet. It should be ready in a few weeks, but until then, we're going to enjoy this corn from Albertsons. Now, anytime I find produce on sale, I try to think ahead, like, what can I use now and what can I save for later? Corn is no different. So today I'm going to blanch and freeze these so that we can enjoy that fresh corn taste long after the sale is over. Now, blanching is important because it helps preserve the flavor, the texture, and the color of the corn. Another good thing about blanching is it stops those enzymes that can make your corn turn mushy or lose its sweetness over time in the freezer, and we don't want that. So all you have to do is boil your corn and then follow that up with an ice bath, and that is what locks everything in. So when you pull it out months later, it still has its color, and most importantly, it still has its flavor. One easy way I stretched this corn was by breaking each ear in half. I bought 8 ears, but breaking them gave me 16. For my family of 5, that's enough for 3 full meals with 1 extra piece left over. It's a small step, but it really helps when you're feeding a large family and trying to make every dollar stretch. Moving on to green beans. The recipe for these are pretty straightforward. I cooked the ham shank in chicken stock for about an hour, and then I added an onion soup mix packet to give it that added flavor. Now, once the meat was fall off the bone tender, I pulled it out and chopped it up, and then I'm going to add it back to the green beans, and that's going to give it so much flavor. The only spices I added was red pepper flakes and black pepper because the ham shank was salty by itself. I didn't have to add any salt. Y'all, these green beans were so flavorful. When I tell you these green beans taste like they came straight from a restaurant, they taste like they came straight from a restaurant. Moving on to the homemade apple pie. So I ended up making homemade pie crust for the apple pie because I didn't have quite enough frozen Pillsbury pie crust in the freezer to do both the sweet potato pie and the apple pies. Now, when I'm making pie crust from scratch, the first thing I always do is sift my flour. Sifting helps break up any lumps and make sure everything blends evenly. And I'm using 2.5 cups of flour. Also added 2 tablespoons of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, this next part right here is a complete game changer. I'm using a cold stick of butter and grating it straight into the flour with a cheese grater. Now, grating the butter helps it mix more evenly into the flour and it keeps it cold longer, which is what you want for a flaky pie crust. Instead of big chunks, you get these thin little shreds that distribute perfectly without overworking your dough. And yes, it really does make a difference. A pie crust made with grated butter is light, flaky, and melts in your mouth. Not only did I grate 1 stick of cold butter, I also grated a 1/2 cup of buttered flavored shortening. And yes, grating the shortening works just like it does with butter. It helps it mix evenly into the flour without warming it up or overworking the dough, which is key for that flaky texture. I like using butter flavored shortening because it gives you the best of both worlds. You get that rich, buttery taste and the tenderness that shortening adds to the crust, and it really makes the pie crust soft and flaky without sacrificing the flavor. Now, when it comes to kneading dough, you've got to put in a little elbow grease. I'm just working it until it comes together nice and smooth. Then I'm shaping it into a ball. Now, once it's formed, I'll split it in half to get 2 evenly sized pie crusts, perfect for a top and bottom or for 2 pies. Then what I'm going to do is wrap each piece in saran wrap and pop them in the fridge for 30 minutes to chill. That rest time helps the dough relax and it makes it easier to roll out later. This is how they look going into the fridge, and this is how they look after 30 minutes. Now, what I'm going to do is just lightly flour this countertop and my rolling pin because I don't want anything sticking. But y'all, this part right here takes me all the way back to being in the kitchen with my mom. Now listen, she made everything from scratch, no shortcuts, and now here I am doing the same thing. That's a blessing, ain't it? Now the good news is I've got plenty of dough left over, which means peach dumplings are coming later this week. Okay, that's a recipe my grandma taught me when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and let me tell you, my family asks for it to this day. That's how you know it's good. Now let's move on to the apple pie filling. Alright, now let's get into this apple pie filling. First thing I'm doing is slicing up these apples. I'm using Granny Smith to be exact because they've got that tartness that holds up real nice when you bake them. It gives you a good balance of sweet and tangy. But listen, if you don't have green apples, use whatever you have on hand. Now you know I believe in using what's already in your kitchen. So next I'm going to squeeze the juice of 1 lemon right over these apples, not just for flavor, but because that lemon juice helps keep them from turning brown. And as far as the spices, I'm keeping it simple. Just 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. I chose allspice instead of nutmeg because it gives you that warm, spiced flavor all in one. And I'm also adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla flavor too. All right. Now let's go ahead and melt down this stick of butter. I went ahead and chopped it up into tablespoons so that it melts quicker and more evenly. Once that's melted, I'm adding in a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Now brown sugar can be a little lumpy, so you just want to stir it gently until all of those little clumps melt down and the mixture is nice and smooth. Now I'm going to add 3/4 cup of white granulated sugar, and I'm not just dumping it all in at once. I'm stirring a little at a time so it all dissolves like it should. This part of the process, there's a lot of stirring, so go ahead and prepare your wrist. So we want to keep stirring until it's smooth and glossy. So next I'm going to add a teaspoon of cinnamon and a 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. Cinnamon brings that classic warm flavor we all know and love, and the allspice just ties it all together. So now I'm adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and yes, we are still stirring. Now we're getting close to the finish finish line, I'm adding cornstarch, 1 tablespoon at a time. Cornstarch is going to help thicken this mixture up, but once you get it to your desired thickness, then you go ahead and add your apples and stir. We want every single slice to be coated in that buttery goodness, no slice left behind. Now pour all of that right into your pie crust and get it nice and even. Then grab your second pie crust. I already rolled mine out, which is why you see all that flour on my countertop. Don't mind that. Once you get the pie crust on top, go ahead and trim off the overhang and save that dough, because you never know what you can make in the future with that leftover dough. Next, I'm going to take a fork and press around the edges to seal that top and bottom crust together. Just a gentle press and then poke 4 little holes up top so that the steam can come out while it bakes. Now, what I did forget to film, Lord help me, was rubbing butter on the top crust. Some folks like an egg wash, and that's fine too, but I love using butter. Either way, do what feels good to you. This pie crust will go into the oven at 350 degrees for 1 hour. And this is how it turned out. Y'all, look at that buttery crust. And this is the sweet potato pie. I didn't film me making it. I'll go ahead and link the video where I actually made a sweet potato pie down in the description box. But y'all, this pie was so delicious. All right, y'all. So here is everything that I cooked today. I didn't film me cooking the macaroni and cheese because I have several videos on here showing how I make mac and cheese. But y'all, this dinner was so amazing. Jordan didn't get to do his review because he was at work while I was cooking, and by the time he got off, it was late. Y'all already know what he thought about all of this food. You know, he gave it 100 out of 10. And just like that, dinner is done. 2 slabs of ribs, green beans, corn on the cob, baked beans, deviled eggs, homemade apple pie, and sweet potato pie. All for $8.79. Now that's what I call working with what you got. Now, if this video inspired you to check your pantry, refrigerator, or freezer before heading out to the grocery store, or it reminded you that you don't need all of this money to make a delicious meal for your family, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you are not a part of the family, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button and become a part of the family. There is always room at the table over here. Drop a comment down below and let me know, what do you pair with ribs when you cook them? I'm sure a lot of y'all barbecue them or smoke them. I hadn't made it there yet. I hadn't made it, but I'm getting there. But let me know, what do y'all pair with your ribs? Until next time, take care of yourself. Love on your family, y'all. That's all I want you to do. I want you to love on your family. And I will see you in the next video. Talk to you later. Bye.